Moving on to our last customer presentation of the day, which is being delivered by Dan Suto from the General Manager, Managed Services at Datacom Systems in New South Wales. Dan has over 20 years' experience in technology management with expertise in business strategy, transformation, change management and innovation, serving in a wide range of industries spanning just about every one of them, Dan. Finance, insurance, government, healthcare, defence, retail, logistics, construction, mining, manufacturing and residential. He thrives on solving challenging business problems in order to unleash true business potential and having the opportunity to work with people and see lasting changes in them as well as himself. Please welcome to the stage Dan Suto.
Thank you. Okay, I've got the tough afternoon shift, so please bear with me. Okay, so thank you for coming to this session on staff enablement, or at least sticking around. It's nice. Today I'll try and take you through a model in 15 or so minutes. It's taken me some 15 years to develop. Given the time that I have allotted, most of this session will be mainly focused on the central tenets of the model as opposed to implementation, but I'm able to take some questions afterwards if you choose to take some questions. Sorry. So what drove me to define such a model and continue to develop it over many years? I think for me, partly there's the inner motivation within me that strives for the elusive goal of perfecting my craft as a leader. But moreover, the personal joy, I guess, of being invited into somebody's professional and personal space to help shape their careers is what continually inspires me and keeps me going. For me, in short, I love leading people. Sorry, and I do have a cold. The other part that drove the creation of this model, I guess, was due to the many managers and leaders in business who gave me more than enough pointers on what not to do. You see, their failures allowed me to learn from their mistakes by witnessing firsthand the damage caused by seeking quick wins on the back of cheap, biased decisions that seem to fuel short-term goals. So working with those bad leaders could have left me sour and jaded as well. But rather, I was able to find an unintended gift that's allowed me to turn business operations around while at the same time developing my own professional network where we continue to share and learn from each other each and every day. The goal of staff enablement is to achieve a commitment from each and every individual. So in Tony Shine's book, I don't know if you've read it, Delivering Happiness, he describes a similar concept of establishing a personal emotional connection between employer and employee. I think for a long time now, businesses have struggled to find that right balance between the needs of the corporation and the needs of the individual. Remember, I'm a general manager. I'm not a talent management specialist or a HR practitioner. But I guess in my world, where the rubber hits the road is making that connection with the individual. So SEM takes the common elements of of business needs and attempts to redefine them from a people paradigm. Most of all, if not all of you, have probably seen the elements I'm about to bring up today. But I guess the secret of the model is to get all the elements working together across all layers of the business all the time. And that's the trick. When you can achieve that, you have an enabled workforce, a self-autonomous workforce. They can do what they need to do. They can problem solve themselves. I can do my job as a general manager. Allow me to quickly explain. So the position descriptions. Many times I come into an organisation and I see this as an artefact that is so important, yet it's reviewed once on the way in and it's never sort of reviewed again. For me, it's a key document that actually allows us to question what behaviours we are really asking from our people. So under the SEM model, we review the position descriptions each year to make sure they're relevant in a constantly changing business world. And then we reflect that back through the model. I work in IT. Every 6 months, the business is different. Our customers come to us in many different modes, at many different levels of maturity. When that analyst picks up the phone, if they're not operating in a relevant manner, they're actually starting to fall behind. The goals and objectives. Essentially, this is a cheat sheet of the salient points of the PD. It covers the core aspects of the job, but it's balanced between measures of quality, continuous improvement, learning and development, and most importantly, looking for the desired team behaviours or standards. It's essentially a list of what it takes to be successful in a role. The key point here is that anything listed in the G&Os or the goals and objectives has to be easily measured with no vague statements. We all know that we heard previous talk about analytics. If you can't measure it, you can't monitor it. If you can't monitor it, you can't manage it, right? So for me, anything that's listed in the goals and objectives not only has to be rounded, but it has to be easily to obtain that information so you can present it back to the individual. Learning and development, well, that's why we're all here. So having an excellent product like Skillsoft does not guarantee adoption or internalisation of the notion of a learning organisation. Too many times in my experience, I come into an organisation, I'll have hundreds of licenses, and I look at the adoption, it's not really being used. Why? Because it's not ingrained or wrapped into what the individual has to do every day. It's almost seen as an afterthought. Okay, so SEM, under Staff Enablement Model, the goal here is to define the skills and experiences required to fill the role, but it also works on what the individual is passionate about. The key thing here is to establish that discipline of learning. You know, I'll have $100,000 on the table in my budget for learning and development, and you'd be surprised how many people pick it up when they're not incorporated into what they do every day. Some people might think that's ridiculous, but it's a busy work day, and if you don't incorporate that in, it just gets left behind. So how I try to balance that in the model is I give half an hour of business time to the individual to work on their learning and development. But again, treating people like adults, I try to make sure that they give me half an hour back. So if we've got 1 hour of learning and development per day and 5 hours per week, average that out to about 48 weeks in a year, assuming they take annual leave, that equates to about 240 hours of learning and development that you can use to not only learn about your job and do it better, but actually work on things that you're passionate about. Sometimes, we talked about the cause and effect. You wonder why people don't learn because we're sometimes forcing them to learn the things that they're not really passionate about. Yet, how many individuals come to work each and every day, have so many talents and so many skills, and yet they seem to take their brain out, get to work, do their job, at the end of the day, put them back in and go home because they leave all their passions at the front door. How can I have an enabled workforce or gain some commitment if that's what I'm asking people to do? So the key thing for me is Skillsoft, excellent product. The body of knowledge that exists is fantastic, but it has to be ingrained to everything what we do. Performance management plans. Staff, managers loathe them, yet I think it's a vital piece in the feedback loop that SEM addresses really well. The PMP processes that I install actually occur on a quarterly basis. Waiting annually for me is too long because often the PMP reviews that I see are subjective and very biased. They're not fact-driven, they're not very clear in what we're measuring. So just doing a job is okay, but if you're not evolving and adding value back under the model, then effectively over time you'll become a non-performer. So each and every year, our clients demand more, the businesses demands more, and if we are not evolving, we're slipping behind as an organisation. Continual service improvement. So doing your job, again, as I said, is not enough anymore. So central to the model is CSI. Here, not improving the processes or the tools or the approach at a macro or micro level, it doesn't cut it. Okay? We have a register of CSI opportunities that our managers and team leaders throw into the system and people put their hands up for. The time and the effort is agreed to by the team leader, and then once completed, it is signed off and it's registered against their GNOs. So that individual has a direct linkage or a correlation to their contribution to improving the business. My goal is not to have a workforce of 100 network engineers or call center personnel. I want 100 little BDMs running around looking for all the opportunities that they can to improve what they do, to add value back to the business, and I need to measure that. I need to reward them for that. If not, again, they're coming in and just doing what they do. One-on-one coaching and mentoring. For me, this is a safe place where people can regularly land. So the onus is on the individual to come prepared about what they would like to speak about in terms of their understanding of the job or any problems that they're having. I guess the opportunity for the team leader and the manager is to understand the person completely. So the rule of thumb that I use is to spend time to unpack the complexities of the individual to better deal with the individual. You can't treat everybody the same. Everybody is different. Everybody is unique. But if I'm not going to spend the time with my frontline staff, and people say, oh, but Dan, you're too busy and you don't have the time, I have to make the time. Leadership is about leading by example. So if I can't even make time for my first reports, I can't really expect them to say, oh, they're too busy as well. So no time is no excuse. Coaching and mentoring is very important. The integrity of the session must remain high at all times, and it's different to a public forum. The whole basis here is about establishing trust. If we don't establish trust with the individual, they're not going to open up. Trying to understand those causal effects of why does that person do what they do every day? Why aren't they performing? Why aren't they learning and developing? What's holding them back? If I'm not going to be bothered to unpack that, I get what I've asked for. So the example that I had was a guy, Bernard, who used to work for me. It was almost like a scene out of a movie where he'd come in half an hour once a week and he'd sit at my desk and I'd say, how's it going? He'd go, yeah, great, everything's good, wonderful. Okay. Do you want to talk about anything? No. Okay. Do you have any problems? None at all. It's all great. Okay. After about the 6th week, we talked a lot about sport, colours, flavours. He actually came in and he said, Dan, I'm really struggling in my role. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I make mistakes every day. I said, great, I make mistakes every day too. I'm probably just better at hiding them than you are. Right? And I guess from that point on, that was his moment. That was his moment where he started to open himself up to, this is a safe place to land. What you say in this session, in these 4 walls, remains a high level of integrity. I'd love to be able to use the information, but then I'll lose connection with the individual. I won't gain commitment that I'm after. So it's treading very lightly to make sure that the session that you have remains at a high level of integrity and you work with the individual to help propel them forward. Rewards and incentives. Creating commitment for me is about striving for relevancy with the individual. Giving away movie passes to a mother of 3 who has family commitments is probably not going to cut it if that person can't get away or actually exercise that reward. So under SEM, we create almost like a Wheel of Fortune scenario, what you might find in a casino, where anything that you land on will motivate the individual to strive for that goal because it's relevant to them. Okay, so that, if I go back to that example of having the mother of 3 who really can't get away of an evening to go to a movie, maybe giving her 2 or 3 nights a week off earlier from work might mean more to her than anything else because it gets her going on her week, on the journey. So for us, tailoring that rewards and incentive scheme, again, is not about pigeonholing people. It's about saying what is relevant to you. And if you strive for that, then you should be rewarded. And we saw some of that today in some of the sum total tools. Reporting, we just heard a lot about reporting. So while there's a truckload of reporting any leader can receive nowadays, the reports I strive for I'm always driving for those leading indicators. So we can always be propelling the business forward. Looking forward as to where we are driving value and how that materializes to the customer experience. Okay, and how does each individual contributor work towards making that outcome happen? So reporting is a necessary feedback loop. However, I guess in the past, if you keep asking for historical data, you're effectively keeping yourself in the past. There's no point. Okay, keep propelling the business forward. There's a crap load of data out there on who's doing what or who's not doing what. So look for those key indicators that keeps driving your people forward. It shapes and it changes the discussion. Rather than being a stick, it becomes about problem solving. Is the individual not getting the workload? Is the team actually not understanding the customer? Are we really just off with the fairies and not understanding what we should be doing at all? Those are the reports that actually drive value discussions. Career path planning. I guess so the whole aim of career path planning under SEM is to ensure that the gatekeepers and the milestones that we set propels the individual as close as possible to the top of the run of that next role as opposed to the bottom of the run. The struggle that I have is all too often people end up ticking boxes in their haste to get a promotion. But what happens to the individual or to the team or to the business when they get into that new role and that they're at the bottom of the run? It's disastrous because the expectations fall away. The pressure starts mounting on that. Geez, little Johnny was a really solid performer over there. Now he's working in the NOC or in a networks team and he's just not performing. It's because I think as leaders we did a poor job at propelling them to as close as possible to the top of that run. Commitment statements. This is the whole goal of staff enablement, right? Is to gain that level of commitment that people are bringing their whole passion to work. Yet how many times have I come into an organisation and I see people who are despondent, they have no connection to the values of the organisation and the culture is rather toxic. Unfortunately, it's too many times in my case. I come in at the GM level. This is really where, if you ask the question, is LMS working? This is where I hear it, okay? However, why would we expect anything different? Right? So for us as leaders, if we can't answer that question of so what, and I can't sit down with any individual and walk the floor of my business and say, do you know what you have to achieve? Are your goals and objectives clear? Or it's like this or it's like this, right? When was the last time you had a discussion with your boss? I haven't spoken to Simon for 2 or 3 months now. Okay. These are very quick indicators I can gain off the floor by seeing, are people actually following what they're doing? If I'm giving time for them to work on their learning and development, yet I look into the Skillsoft and see that they actually haven't registered a course update for months, I say, well, what are we doing here? Right? So it changes the conversation. If I can actually propel people to engage at this level and have it from a people paradigm, I think they'll be very much engaged. Without a model, I'm not saying this is the model, but without a model, I think to gain a level of commitment is very difficult. And that's what we're all here for, right? Is to have that level of commitment and passion where we bring our best game to the business. I think the problems we face is largely contributable to the organisation failing to gain a true commitment or that personal emotional connection with the individual. If we reflect back on a situation in our own personal lives where we're engaged in doing something that truly allows us to express ourselves, did we need to be motivated? What was the level and the quality of our output? Translate that into a high-performing workplace. Would you expect to see the symptoms that are up on the screen now? So working under a model that can find the balance between business and personal needs is something I think we need more of, not less of. The key thing that I've found when implementing SEM is that very quickly it sorts the wheat from the chaff. So make no mistake, this model will polarise your organisation whether you like it or not, between those who want and need to be there and those who merely come to work and just do stuff. The question that I have is, do we want more people or the right kind of people doing the jobs we need in our organisations of the future? I have 120 people reporting to me. My previous organisation, I had a whole lot more. I don't really need more people. I need the right kind of people. I need people who are driving continuous improvement. They're business development managers, and they also answer a phone call. Okay? My belief is that regardless of the profession, organisations that truly thrive develop not only the individual in terms of job competency, but develop and evolve the individual's future job prospects as well. So under the Staff Enablement Model, one can be a good performer and meet the basic needs or KPIs of one's role, but that would only ever equate to being a medium performer under my model. It sounds harsh, but I'll explain. You see, the focus on SEM is doing more than just a job. It's not because someone has asked you to, me or somebody else, but it's because I believe people need to see a positive change within themselves as well as the output of their personal contribution to the business. Any model that can achieve that is a great model. Lastly, those individuals that can demonstrate competency in a role, improve the business, and continue to develop their personal and professional skills are employees I think you need to hold on to. I know it's an obvious statement, but my view is pay them more, give them more of everything, because chances are they're the ones carrying your business forward. Those who can't or refuse to learn, I think will struggle in this constantly changing business world. I think without this discipline, people will be left behind. And that's why SEM polarises the organisation, because effectively it is a system of work that unless you are contributing to the model, and therefore the success of the business and yourself, you are basically saying to me that you're opting out. So why go through all this? What's the benefit? Sounds like a hard slog, and it is. I'm actually 21, but I look like I'm 45. So over my 15 years in leadership roles, here are some of the benefits you can expect to see in an enabled organisation. So one organisation I came into, and again, I had to check these figures 5 times when I came into this business, had an attrition rate of about 73%. It also had skyrocketing recruitment costs of about $1 million per annum. Once SEM was implemented, we reduced the external attrition rates to less than 3%. Don't get me wrong, internal attrition where people are moving within an organisation to bigger and better things is a good thing. The attrition rates that I'm referring to was people scrambling to get out. At the same time, the staff engagement scores were extremely toxic at about 43%. My first week into this particular role, one of my peers introduced his team of 60 to me as his sheltered workshop. And my comment back to him was that one's department typically reflects one's leadership. I sort of shut him up for a bit. At the same time, sorry, it's not clicking over. So after SEM was internalised, that same toxic team won a company-wide award for best performance in 2010 and was later established as a centre of excellence across the business. The same team also won more client awards than the other part of the business. 43% of the team received career advancement opportunities as the business grew. So this is one of my favourite slides. ATR, talking about measures, or average time to resolution, is the end-to-end time it takes to resolve a client's case. So while under certain circumstances, the SLA time can be manipulated by effectively stopping the clock under certain conditions, ATR cannot. And it only reflects the customer's experience from when they called to actually when it was resolved, regardless of what the SLA says. When we started with SEM, it took on average 6.5 or 7 days to resolve a client case. The benchmark rate was 3 days. By the time we finished the journey, we achieved acceptable levels for the first time in the team's history. So in summary, if you reduce toxic attrition, increase staff engagement, enable the workforce to take on more with less, and give them a model that promotes learning on all levels and improves the customer experience, what do you think happened with our SLAs? Well, let's see. So at the start of the journey, we introduced Skillsoft and to the workforce under the wrapper of staff enablement, and we're effectively ready to launch. In other words, the stage was set to become a learning organisation. By using Skillsoft, tools like Lean Six Sigma and other industry-relevant tools and techniques, we delivered a wonderful result. At the start of the journey, if I told my management team that we'd be able to achieve less than 20% breach rate, they probably would have thought I was on ice. All right? What is Dan smoking? Yet over a period of time, the naysayers started to become believers. I love to take all the credit, but all I did was implement a system of work that allowed people to shine, feel supported and cared for, and allowed me to implement the tools and techniques to get the job done. Rather simple, really. Whenever I come into an organisation, these are the first 3 things I look for. Leadership. People-orientated leaders that navigate the business world with people rather than despite people. Implementing SEM in this sort of business environment is merely adding to the business's core DNA. Implementing SEM in an organisation without this style of leadership is possible. I've done it, but it needs more conditions to be successful in the long run. Commitment. Let me be very clear. During the initial and honeymoon stages of the implementation of SEM, the workload on your managers and team leaders will be higher than normal. If they don't have buy-in, they don't understand the model, they're not willing to give it a go, then as leaders you have to be very clear with your commitment. It's either get on the bus or get off it. And the reason for that is, and it sounds harsh, but the reason for that is once the workforce knows that management are sincere and honest in their attempts to prove the business, there's no turning back. You'll screw things up royally, right? So managers and team leaders who aren't committed and behind the cause are actually putting everything else at risk. I would rather tell the business don't start the journey if you're only going to give it lip service and then let it fall away. SMEs, subject matter experts. So during the formation process, I look for these shining lights of expertise, passion and commitment. Those team members who have the passion, they also have the right motivation and the right insights that are only going to enhance the model. So I've worked in IT for over 20 years, but I've also used SEM in consulting arenas. I've used it in a friend's restaurant. I've used it in construction companies who all wanted to improve their business. The same 10 elements I used to gain commitment. Sorry. And that is because SEM is transferable. People are people. The time it takes can vary, but usually there's 3 months of getting the foundations in. Then I usually recommend a honeymoon period so people can get used to the new work practices. And then we actually launch and we do a go live to make the change lasting. The change program can be for specific teams. I've implemented it for leadership teams. I've implemented it for frontline staff. Either way, it will be difficult to become a modern, agile, and continuously evolving and learning organisation without a model that can ubiquitously travel and traverse all the layers of the organisation. The key thing is to correctly assess the conditions for success. So whilst this was a brief overview of SEM, there are many more considerations to take before full implementation, and I welcome any questions or comments on what I've covered off today. The examples provided today were extreme cases where effectively corporate open heart surgery had to occur, or we're establishing new greenfield sites. In your particular case, it may take as little as 3 months to see positive change. Whatever the situation may call for, using key partners such as Skillsoft, along with industry-recognised tools and techniques, can guarantee higher levels of success than just implementing a talent management or learning development plan alone. Chances are that you are all in your roles because you want to see your organisation or the individual succeed. If you don't have a model like SEM, then look to adopt one or use this one as a starting point for your thinking. As part of my personal and professional commitment, I'm willing to work with any organisation who is willing and passionate about getting the best out of their employees. All you have to do is reach out to be enabled. Thank you.